I think what we should do as speakers is come up with a nickname. So you're truly awesome. So Diva, I think I think there's a positive side of that. So you can call me Mo Money Gaber for today. That's what some of my friends call me. I don't know where that came from. But seriously, thank you to the entire organizing group of Travel Tech Con. I was involved in seeing kind of the early days of this, and it's amazing to see where it's come, and we're finally here, right? That's happening. So my name is Mohammad Gaber. I'm the head of industry strategy for travel at Adobe. Everybody's now thinking, what the heck does Adobe have to do with travel? If you have that question, come afterwards and ask me. But just a little bit about my history. I actually was previously at United Airlines. I headed up e-commerce strategy specifically around the new platforms, so mobile, and kiosks and some of the other platforms. I'm a travel geek. I'm very excited that we have this gathering today. So what I'm going to talk about is innovation in travel. Do we have massive innovation or is it a bust? And I have an admission to make. I actually pulled this presentation together in the last evening. I've been traveling a lot and I've been thinking a lot about where I'm going to take this presentation. And it really crystallized in a conversation that I had with a former colleague of mine, an executive at United. And when I told him that I was doing this presentation, he laughed. He said, "What innovation?" Which was kind of surprising, but it really helped me build the foundation of what I was going to talk about today. So if we look at the history, amazing, and how many naysayers there are around travel and travel innovation, right? This one, I saw this one as I was doing my search. The travel startup fallout is here. Will anyone survive? The top 5 reasons your travel startup will fail. Why do most travel startups fail? Lessons from the demise of another failed travel startup. I was like, man, is this depressing. But looking at what we have today, in terms of this gathering, and by the way, Max at 8 a.m. in the morning, thank you, on a Saturday, it really says that the innovation, travel innovation, and the community and the ecosystem is actually very healthy. So what I believe, and I'm going to go through this presentation, is that we have been going through waves of innovation, and we have completed a wave of innovation that is now done, right? And that's weeded out some of, a lot of the learnings, weeded out some of the business models that were not successful, and we're going into a next wave of travel innovation that is actually very healthy, very strong, and has the opportunity to really change this industry. So today, I think we're here. We're at the bottom of this dam where we have again, we're coming through that last phase of innovation, and we are seeing a trickle, this next wave building. But what we know is behind that dam is a massive amount of opportunity. Why do we know that? The size of the opportunity and the amount of economic impact, according to the WTTC in a recent study, is actually massive. By 2025, the number of jobs that are supported by travel globally is 135 million. Just think about that for a second. 135 million. $12 trillion worth of contribution to GDP. It's a massive industry, and there's a lot of opportunities for that industry to innovate and to change and do things better. And so we know that there are massive barriers. We have a dam that is not allowing us to take the full opportunity of this potential to really open up the floodgates and change the way people travel and experience travel, both from a leisure, and I feel like a lot of our conversations are focused around leisure, but also as a business traveler who spends most of the time on the road, massive opportunities to make people's lives a lot easier and make it more convenient to travel. So what are those barriers? I think we all, if we're here, we understand. It's restricted supply. The access to the supply, whether it's the airline, cruise, hotel, I mean, that's a pretty wide, if you look at the definition of travel, there's a lot of different areas and segments that are a part of this industry. And there's some significant barriers to entry. If you look at, I come from an airline, you're not going to start a new airline tomorrow. There's actually significant capital investment that's required. And there's similar challenges with the other segments as well. So if you look at hotel and their go-to-market and working with franchisees or the ownership model and cruise, similar constraints that make us as entrepreneurs, as innovators, have to work with the supply. And then the last part is, consumer acquisition and getting share. And I was actually looking at, the startups that have actually succeeded and have built massive businesses. What was their original foundation? You look at Expedia, it was started within Microsoft. Massive amounts of funding, right, to allow it to get that mind share, right? So these are all barriers that we know exist in the industry. So the previous phases of innovation, I think, have been very narrowly focused around single parts of the journey. And what I'm going to talk about is there's different models of innovation, and the initial phases of the innovation in this industry have really been around, after the Expedias and the Pricelines. It's about building a better mousetrap. How do I redesign and slightly change the approach within a very narrow stretch of the travel life cycle and try to steal the share? And that's where that failure came from, right? Everybody was so narrowly focused around this slice, but missing the fact that there is a massive opportunity really throughout the journey. Now, what I don't want you to take away from from my point here is that I'm not saying that there isn't enough or room for innovating in this area, right? Or there isn't any value that could be extracted. I think there's probably a lot of value. But what I'm going to go through is I think there's other areas of innovation and opportunity that perhaps are a little bit harder, but yet have a lot of value. So let's look at a couple of what are those other areas of innovation. So I look at them as three. There's design innovation, building a better mousetrap. There's business model innovation. And then there are the moonshots. Now, there could be a lot more innovation types there, but those, as I look at the categories of innovation, those are the three that I really focus on. And as I talk and advise other startups, I say, where do you fit in terms of this innovation picture? And you may not fit in just one bucket. There could be multiple buckets that you would fit in. So let's take an example. And this just happened completely by chance. I know Recharge is sponsoring the conference, but I love this model, right? It is both design and a business model innovation. It solves a problem. I have had this problem, right? So Divya talked about solving problems. I've had the problem where, as a traveler, I've had either a flight cancellation or I missed a flight or something, and I need a hotel just for 2 hours, right? I don't need a hotel for a whole night. I just need it for 2 hours. So for me, this solves a massive problem. For the hotel, it's day parting, right? It allows me to take this inventory and break it up into smaller chunks and to allow me to get more revenue, right? It's a beautiful model. Now, there are other examples of that business model that can, try different types of innovation. Rocket miles. How many of you have used Rocket miles here? A couple of you. I love Rocket miles, right? Again, it solves the problem. There's an incentive, certainly from the supplier perspective, in terms of the commoditization of my product, and it allows those that have a little bit of flexibility to really, as a traveler again, get more miles for the travel that I'm doing, right? And it's starting to impact multiple parts of the customer journey. those of you that have spent a lot of time in this industry know that the way that some of these companies have survived and the importance of loyalty and miles is incredibly large. So I was actually involved in the early days. United actually took an early ownership stake in Rocket Miles. And, from a supply perspective, it was a problem. We had an opportunity on how do we grow the usage of this currency, which is Mileage Plus. And so this model worked really well, right? It allowed us to sell miles. It allowed us to get customers who are using more of the miles, get that cycle going, right? So from a supply perspective, I didn't have as much angst with this model because it checked off some of my buckets of where I wanted to grow the business. Another example of where companies are taking design and business model innovation and really looking at the entire cycle rather than components of the cycle. I know we have somebody from App in the Air here. Thank you. And what I like about this is, if you look at the supply constraints and the challenges of working with the supply side, what I like about this is it's solving a problem with the user where, if I'm not loyal to the airline, I'm traveling with a lot of different airlines. How do I facilitate that experience throughout the entire journey across multiple providers, right? So if I take the comparison of the media space and what's happening with over-the-top set-top boxes, right? That's changing the media landscape. This is that type of innovation, right? It's saying, how do I impact the travel journey, the travel life cycle, but not have to integrate, and I hope I'm representing this well, as tightly or have to rely on the supply. I can still provide a service to the user that they're driving value from. So we're going through that wave, right? We're in this new wave where we're looking at different types of innovation. It's beyond design, it's into business model innovation, right? But what does the future look like as we look into the next few years? Divya, you obviously mentioned AI and conversational commerce. It's such a big conversation I feel like suddenly somebody switched it in January and said, wow, this is a really big deal. It's going to happen, at least in the customers that I talk to. Those of us that have been watching this for a while and watching what's happened in China with WeChat and others knew that this was coming. This is the next iteration, right? So this is going to be a big change in the industry. Google, enough said, move on. Yeah, I mean, the stuff that they're doing in travel, they have obviously bigger ambitions. And as entrepreneurs, it's something that we need to obviously be aware of. But I think what's interesting as I talk to some of my customers is that there's a little bit of a transition in the supply side around how they're starting to think of their businesses. And this is a little bit of a stretch for them, right? If you think about an airline who is, they have safety as a priority. When I worked at the airline, it was about clean, safe, reliable, right? Norm, you probably know this, right? That is their mantra. And they probably take clean, safe, reliable too much where it actually impacts the pace of innovation. But what I see is a slight shift in the conversation, and it's driven by the market dynamics. So in the hotel side, they're really facing an existential crisis, right? What is the value of a brand today? What is the value of a Marriott or a Hyatt or a Wyndham, right? Vis-a-vis an OTA or vis-a-vis any of the other players that are in the industry. And the airlines, similarly, I think there's a recognition that, their position allows them, there's an opportunity here, if I start to think of myself as a platform, that there's an opportunity here to do things that I can't do with my resources. And building that ecosystem around my product will actually allow me to build greater loyalty with my travelers. So I think over the next couple of years, I'm willing to bet that we're going to see a lot more, and we're seeing it a little bit with Lufthansa, with their direct connect, but we're going to see a little bit more of, let's start to think of these businesses as platforms. And as entrepreneurs, where do we fit in on top of that platform? Whether it's an airline or a hotel. I don't know if anybody here agrees with me. I'd I'd love to continue the conversation, but that's where I see things going. And then finally, I think what's really going to open this up, what is going to, Divya, you mentioned Echo. My son, who's 5 years old, walks around all day, barking orders at Echo. It's maddening. But I did, Kayak just announced an integration with Echo, and so I did the search, and my God, was it slow. It felt so slow compared to everything else that I was doing with Echo. It actually told me, you're going to have to wait a little bit to get these results. I was like, this does not work. And so what I think is needed is a little bit of a moonshot, right? We're riding on rails that are tens of years old, the distribution system. And if you're not familiar with the distribution system in travel, please familiarize yourself with, in a lot of detail, around what it means, to the supply side around distribution. It's really core to understanding this industry. So what I see, and I know Max is going to talk about this later on today, is I see the evolution of standards, of decentralized distribution as what is going to be critical to allow us to achieve that next level of innovation in this industry. And there's going to be somebody in this room, I hope, that does it. It's going to make for a very exciting time. With that, I'd like to thank you again for turning up really early, and for the organizers, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation today. Thank you.